an economic value to Wilson volleyballs, which had 10.5 minutes of screen time. The volleyball itself had 10.5 minutes of screen time.
Dude,
Isn't that
Wilson's relationship with Tom Hanks in that movie is priceless. I don't even know why they're trying to put a value on that.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Doogles, listen, we need to have a serious talk. So just you do one William Green interview and then you're being mentioned as the heir apparent to the Ellen show. Like, don't let this fame go to your head, bud.
I mean, it's hard not to, man. when the fans come calling,
you just give the people what they want, right?
Give the people what they want.
Unless it's pizza. Don't give the people pizza talk.
No, pizza.
That's all
too
I
much
hear
pizza's
about,
bad
man.
for you. Too much sodium, bro.
I will not let pizza slander happen on this podcast.
Pizza slander.
That's right.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah.
So
anyway, what's up? Let's dive in.
Everything's up. Well, no, actually, not everything's up. Not until the end of this week, because there was some blood bath going on this week in the markets, man. It was which I know you're gonna be like, why are you looking at the market on a daily basis? Who cares about the market? Look at it only in decades. But it's we were getting some hits. People were screaming inflation.
Yeah, especially the Bitcoiners. I had a fun week in the market. I liked it.
Yeah. That's,
I kind of
say I didn't like it.
Okay, good. I kind of cheer for things to go down. And then all in all, I don't think things really went down.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. The people that were not happy about this week are the Taiwanese.
Is that because they don't have access to like the latest movie releases, or what's happening here?
The Taiwanese stock market crashed pretty significantly. It went into correction territory with the quicks. Did you read about this?
No, I'm out of the loop.
So it's basically a warning sign. Not that we need these warning signs because we've seen this happen over and over again, but it's a warning sign on the danger of too much leverage and what happens when margin calls start to unwind things pretty quickly. So throw out a couple facts, but basically the Taiwanese stock market, it ended up going down like about 9% over the course of just a couple days, but 9% actually in one day. So it was the worst one-day performance in the history of their market. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So is this directly tied to debt and margin calls, or is that just one component? Like, did it have a rough day, which triggered some margin calls, which made the next day rough? Do we really know those facts?
That what I'm reading is basically that it's because of margin calls. I mean, I don't know. I can't look under the hood too much, but the facts are that there's a 46% expansion in margin debt this year, and that's the highest since 2011.
Yeah.
And so the Taiwanese, I don't know what their it's the Taiwanese S&P 500, whatever that is, basically during that period went up by about 19%, right? So it started as margin started increasing, the highest in a decade. The stock market also was going up pretty significantly. And so then basically I think the one day was 9%, but over the course of 3 days, I don't have this fact in front of me, but over the course of 3 days, it was something like 15% was the decline. And so I think it's just looking at the correlation between those two things and then making an assumption, but it's crazy.
Yeah, so this is coming to the U.S. I just don't know when, right? I mean, we talked, gosh, it's probably 10 episodes back now, but we talked about debt doesn't matter until the price goes down. And things just continue to skyrocket around here. Well, I guess there was a blip this week, but it's going to be so interesting. Like, I don't want this to come across the wrong way because it could sound wrong, but I'm like getting eager to watch it unfold in the U.S. because there's so many interesting storylines that come out of kind of things pulling back a little bit.
I think so this is another narrative that I tell myself. Sure, you can throw out whatever, but a narrative I've been telling myself recently is basically that the market is getting hit constantly, right? There's always stuff, ups and downs, right? There's a lot of volatility, always getting hit, and it's just, I think it's when it gets hit, at the point of ultimate fragility is when things start to tumble, right? It's not that there's all the stories that end up coming out that are like, oh, this is the time because of inflation fears, or this is the time because of XYZ. Those things happen all the time. So it's like, it's not because of that. It's when the inflation fear happens and we are at some breaking point where there are extreme cash flow needs. So then people need to sell, or whatever the case might be. It's like, it's that extreme point where there's no support effectively, because we're at the ultimate point of fragility. Now, can you guess when that point is? No, right? But I think that's ultimately what it is. But this stuff isn't different.
True. I think it's probably just my psyche. But like this week, that one day that we were down 1.5% or whatever, my portfolio actually performed really well, and so it was weird. But you read like the news or hear the sentiment at that point in time, and I was like, is this the top? Is this the breaking point? Again, this is probably entirely related to me and nothing else. It just feels like there's like the emperor has no clothes. I mean, there's limited positive stories that I know as to why we should be one of the most expensive stock markets ever. I don't know. I don't understand why there's this much optimism. And so when the inflation news hit, I was like, is this potentially a tipping point?
Yeah. So the thing is, though, the emperor has no clothes. I think we can all agree. Emperor's buck naked, right? But people got credit cards, and so it doesn't matter. It's like the emperor has no clothes, but I'm on Rodeo Drive with my black Amex, and so I can just go buck wild crazy. Now, when that Amex, which apparently has an unlimited credit cap, you realize it actually is limited. And you get that call. That's the issue. And so we just go, how many credit cards are out there, and when are they going to max out, right? But the emperor has no clothes, but we're trying to buy.
Yeah, but to use your analogy, I thought maybe what was happening with the inflation fears, because the storyline about like cheap money, low interest rates that's been going for a while, it hasn't really showed up in inflation just yet. And I'm not saying it's there. Like, there's a lot of reasons why this number that came out this week is maybe overinflated, but it was like the country had that black Amex and they just kept spending and there were no ramifications. And then I thought, there's gonna be a story. It obviously wasn't this week, where the country collectively goes, oh my, the black Amex doesn't work anymore for ABC reasons. And then things have to correct. But I don't want to, this isn't the doom and gloom podcast. I didn't even intend to go down this road.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Talking about international stock market crashes.
Well, hey, Doogles, that was your fault. Kick off the show with the stock market crash and a margin call. Let's talk about something a little more fun, right? Do you know how many cars they wrecked in the Fast and the Furious series?
How many?
1,487 cars at an estimated cost of at least $30 million. Isn't that insane?
That just feels wasteful. doesn't that feel?
We got people over here like worrying about recycling pop cans, and the Fast and the Furious is wrecking almost 1,500 cars for what, 10 movies? This is insane. How many movies are there? Oh, this is the first 7 movies. They're wrecking 200 plus cars.
This is
movie.
You just swan dove into the fishbowl there. It's a cool article. I think it's pretty interesting. The economics of movie placements in the hustle. I didn't realize the way this industry worked.
Yeah, so sorry, I did dive into the fishbowl because I love this article so much. So we'll put it out on the Twitter. Let's give some basic facts to the listeners. Now, all these things, this is more art than science, I think, in estimating these values. But this article kicks off with the Tom Hanks movie Castaway, right? And tries to put an economic value to Wilson volleyballs, which had 10.5 minutes of screen time. The volleyball itself had 10.5 minutes of screen time.
Dude, Wilson's relationship with Tom Hanks in that movie is priceless. I don't even know why they're trying to put a value on that.
Oh, you really got me there. Yeah, anyway, they estimate that screen time is worth almost $2 million in exposure for Wilson volleyballs. And if you talk about Super Bowl commercials and everything else, like that seems in the ballpark of fair. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So
I think you gotta, the weird thing about that one in particular, and I know you're gonna hit on some of the other facts, is you have to look at the like general, I'll call it liquidity of products. Usually, like someone's not gonna watch Castaway and be like, I actually haven't even realized that I needed volleyballs, and I'm gonna go buy volleyballs. Like that's different than a consumer good like beer or something, right? You just go like, I bought exactly the same number of volleyballs after Castaway as before Castaway. Can you guess that number?
zero.
Zero.
But you're missing the cross sell possibilities. I mean, you might have bought a basketball or football, and the Wilson brand might have been a little more appealing to you.
Okay.
And like maybe you didn't buy a volleyball to play volleyball with, but maybe you brought like a volleyball to turn into your best friend. I mean, right?
Well, I got to air my dirty laundry though. I thought it was the bifurcation between the brands that pay and then those that don't have to. I thought was pretty interesting because it was saying that that generally speaking, and this is the way I thought the world worked, was generally speaking, people believe that the brands you always pay. So like if you see a brand that's in a movie, there's a cash exchange, and they mentioned examples of that are Harley Davidson, Heineken, Aston Martin for James Bond. But then it said the majority are not actually cash payments. It's just that movies cost so much, 65 million on average to produce is what I was saying. So movies cost so much that they spend millions of dollars on wrecking cars. And so if they can get free props, the more the merrier. And brands are willing to get the exposure. And so there's like a whole industry of product placement agencies that exist.
This reminds me of almost government lobbying. You know, it's kind of like we're going to set up around Hollywood and find mutually beneficial relationships. Some things I didn't know, like in the George Clooney movie Up in the Air, he has like the BlackBerry was product placement. The Hilton robes were product placement. It's just a fascinating article. But then like Ray-Ban didn't pay for exposure in Top Gun. They just got Tom Hanks to wear the sunglasses, and that was a huge hit.
Yeah, which is weird because he wasn't even in the movie. So like that was just terrible product placement.
Why did I say Tom Hanks?
Because Wilson, you still got Wilson. So I guess that did work. You're still thinking about Wilson.
See, man, it's like I'm going to buy some volleyballs after this. Anyway, then some of the numbers. I mean, you mentioned this, but like Heineken paid $45 million for product placement with the James Bond movie Skyfall. That's insane. I don't think there's any way they got that level of exposure. And what BMW paid over $100 million to supply cars for like the mid to late 90s Bond movies, which I think that's debatable. I remember those being prominently placed in those movies and kind of being like into the fact that they were used there. So it's good product placement, but did they get $100 million worth of it? It's a really fascinating article. Thanks for sending it out, Doogles, and we'll put it on the Twitter.
I think some of the beauty in the world of marketing is you have insane amounts of attribution and tracking and data that marketers have now that they used to not. But in a world like this, you kind of can't fully track it. And so was it worth $100 million? There's some marketer somewhere that has a spreadsheet that says yes. Right? Is it really that? Like, that's the answer.
You can make the numbers up. Also, I love this. There was a little fallout between Reebok and the people that filmed Jerry Maguire, kind of like during the filming, it sounded like. Is that how you read it, Doogles? And so they changed the script a little to paint Reebok from a positive light to a negative light, and I think there actually ended up being a lawsuit about it. So that's just so cool.
Yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, it's a cool article. It's an interesting industry. Fishbowl time?
Let's do it.
How would you feel about a quiz?
I love being humiliated on national television or national podcasting, whatever this is.
Yeah, international.
There we go. Yeah, I forgot about our Latvian and our Guatemalan crew.
Exactly. So this goes back to a bet that you mentioned before. It's sometime recently, and you were talking about a bet between Mark Cuban and some other person.
I think it's Peter Millark.
Oh yeah, Peter Millark. And so they were betting as to whether Dogecoin or a couple other stocks are going to beat the S&P 500 over the next decade, right?
Yeah.
So So I decided to do a little playtime, little data playtime, and I went back and looked at how many stocks over 10-year periods over the last 100 years, basically, beat the stock market. In this case, the stock market's VTI because that's what I use in my data. But anyway, it's basically the same, right? Overall stock market. So I want to give you a quiz and see how good you are. Some of these numbers are actually pretty surprising to me. So
Okay.
I'm going to pick a couple years, and I want you to tell me how many stocks, what percent of stocks you believe beat the overall market over the preceding decade.
So let me ask some logistics in your back testing. Did you do like rolling 10-year periods starting every year, or was it like the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, or all the above?
Yeah, I did all the above. I basically just looked at from the data I have goes back to 1925. And
Okay.
so I basically just said from 1934 through 2020, every year, what is the 10 years before?
Of the previous 10 years. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. And then looked at the previous 10 years, like what percent for that year. So for example, like in 2020, if you go 2011 through 2020, what percent of companies that were around in 2020? And then I also looked at what percent of companies that were around in 2011 that were still around in 2020, right? So to get rid of any of that survivor
you
bias,
handle
basically.
the survivorship bias.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. Can you tell me, if this has to be after the quiz, that's fine, but was outperformance more likely long ago than it is today?
It's not quite that simple. Yeah, I'll give a little more detail on why it's not quite that simple once we quizzelate and perpetrate. Okay, you ready for it?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna choose the year 1999. In the preceding 10 years,
Okay.
what percent of companies beat the market?
Got to think a little bit about what's happening in the market in that time. So I'm steering clear of the 87 crash and everything else. I'm going to say 18% of companies beat the market during that time.
So about 10%. About
Okay.
10%. And that's taken, if you look at just the companies that were still around that year, it was a little over 20%. But
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, but 10% because many didn't make it. We had many
So give
brethren.
me some of those names. Can you throw out some names that beat the market in 99?
No, I don't have the names by year. I can do that separately. That would just be
Oh,
way
wow.
too much data.
This quiz sucks.
I'm sorry. I can do it. I did pull the names for 2020 because I was just doing just checking sanity checks and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the data, but yeah. But then, so now let's go forward a decade. Okay.
Okay.
And let's go to 2010. What percent of companies?
So, what's so interesting about the first example, I'm going to treat this like an interview where I give the listeners some of my thought process here. My initial guess was going to be as in the 10% range. But I got a little cute thinking that maybe back in 99, it was more common for outperformance. So I think most of my guesses are going to be around 10%. What happened in the decade preceding 2010 is obviously 2007, 2008 crash. So part of me wants to think that the survivorship, the ability to survive that could have taken out even more companies. I think I'm going to guess on the lower side, like maybe 8%.
No, you got your thought process a little bit reversed.
Okay.
Which is logical. Like it's logical. But the way that you started thinking about it was right. It's the implication of it is what was reversed. So basically, if you ignore survivorship bias for a moment and just look at the total number of companies that exist, or sorry, total number of equities, I should say, because this includes ETFs and stuff too. The total number of equities that existed in 2010 and what percent of those equities beat the stock market is actually almost 60%.
No, I get it. So you're saying
however, if you take out survivor, if you account for survivorship bias, it's 27%. Yeah, and so basically, it's this is going back to the question that you asked earlier around is it more or less likely, over time, have things changed there? It actually depends more on the cycles. The the time itself doesn't matter. It's when you look at it. And so a time like 1999, when the market is going, like the market's going cray, right? That's different than when the market itself tanks. And so companies are more likely, or equities are more likely to have beaten the market at a period where the market has gone down, clown's town, right? Versus when the market's on the uppity ups.
Well, yeah, this is actually a fun insight. And I hope we articulate it well for the listeners. What you mean, I think, is companies that survive. So your subset of companies that started in 2001 for that last decade we talked about.
Most of them didn't make it.
Yeah, a lot of those companies didn't make it. So you had to, if it's a future-looking bet, you had to pick in 2001. And in 2001, you were more likely that your company didn't even survive to 2010. But if your company survived, that company was more likely to beat the market.
Yep.
Right? Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, that's the right way to say it. And so if you look over this roughly 100-year period, it's a little bit less. But the median percent, accounting for survivorship bias, the median percent was about 28% of surviving of companies that beat the market. The minimum was what we talked about before, about 10%, 99. And the max was 57%, which is straight up insane. But that came in that post-war era. So that was like in basically the late 40s, early 50s was just like getting buck wild.
Yeah, but let me make sure I'm understanding the math right, because in order for more than 50% of the companies to beat the index, we're calling it here, you have to have a lot of companies going bankrupt, right? Because if the index is made up of a component of the performance of all the stocks, if more than half are outperforming, the ones that are underperforming have to be significantly underperforming, right?
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
That's interesting. Can we do 2020 with names?
Yeah, sure.
So I want to give my guess as percentage. Let's see if I can. This requires some second level thought, so let's see if my logic is right here.
Love it.
So pretty much the last decade has been like pretty much straight up. I mean, there's nothing major, no major crashes in here really.
So then what would you assume then? Lower or higher percent?
Yeah.
Based on what we just talked about.
Yeah, so there's less companies going bankrupt. So I'm going to go on the lower side. I'm going to say it's like 13%.
14%. That's good.
All right.
Yeah, 14%. What's number one? What is the number one through the end of last year? The number one best performing company over the previous decade?
I mean, my cop-out answer would be Amazon.
That would be your cop-out answer. It's incorrect.
Yeah, Monster beverage or
no. Think about. It's an obvious one.
Oh, Tesla.
That's not to. Yeah, there you go. Tesla 41 times the market over the previous 10 years. I don't know what component of that 41 came just last year, but it was but that was number one.
Well, wasn't it up something like 800%? Maybe I'm thinking trailing 12 months, not rather than last year.
It was something like that. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was insane. It's insane.
I mean, so on that logic, gosh, that's crazy. I mean, the outperformance wasn't too great until you throw on that times 8 in the last period. Tesla, crazy. So how many stocks have outperformed? How many stocks make up that 13%?
About 1,000, a little over 1,000.
Okay. Yeah, that's good stuff. So I love that you're the research superstar of this show, because I think there's some good insights to be had there in terms of when indexing can be used to your advantage and maybe when it's not.
Yeah, it actually turned out to be more interesting than I thought, because at first, just given that bet, you'd thrown the question out to me of like, what 2 stocks would you choose, right? And so then I started thinking like, what's the likelihood of any 2 random stocks actually beating the market?
Yeah, let's continue with this thought experiment, and the listeners can send us hate mail if they don't like it. By the way, hate mail is perfect at Skippy Doogles at Gmail and at Skippy Doogles on Twitter. So we both would say, right, that some correction is coming in the next 10 years. I think that's like, I feel like that's a no-brainer bet. I hate forecasts and I hate saying something's going to happen this year. But if you're talking over the next 10 years, I'm pretty confident, like probably 90% plus, that a correction is coming, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like you mean like a monumental multi-year decline?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, they come about every decade and we're overdue. So yeah, going out 10 years, like I would hope so. If it doesn't happen in the next 10 years, I will have 100% of my portfolio international. Like there's like no, I don't want to touch the US at all.
Yes. So that means that if we say a correction is coming, that means that if we manage to select a stock or two that is guaranteed, well, not guaranteed, but very likely to be around 10 years later. And this actually reminds me of the William Green anti-fragility, staying in the game conversation we had last week, right?
Yep.
That our chances of outperforming the market are going to be boosted during that time frame. So I think if I was making a selection here, my first criteria would be I want something that's strong and steady and basically is unimaginable to not be around 10 years from now. So that leads to a different type of stock for sure. I've thought about this and I've really struggled with this. Because I think forecasting is so hard, when the time horizon goes out to 10 years and you're talking about an individual equity, I have a hard time knowing what the future looks like in 10 years. I feel like you're better equipped to kind of think about what life might be 10 years out. I don't know that means you'll you'll nail it, but do you struggle with that like me?
Yeah, I mean it's hard because I think your thought process makes a lot of sense. Like I'll throw another variable in there. As you said, what's going to be around? Like what's likely to be around and what's likely to have some gas in the tank too, right? Like Tootsie Roll, very likely to be around. Tootsie Roll is like the most mediocre performing stock of any period, I think, right? And so you kind of need both of those. And so do you go the route of, I'll say blue and true, like a blue chip, like going to be around? Or do you go the route of something that's IPO'd recently, because like recently as in the last few years?
Yeah.
Because it probably has a lot of gas in the tank, right? But also needs to be around. And so I think it is tricky. I know the two that I would choose, but it's, and one I feel pretty good about with the matching both of those criteria. One, it could coin flip as to whether or not it's around, not because of a bankruptcy situation, but regulation could take it down, or it could be acquired pretty easily.
So let me throw in one more thought, because I want to keep the listeners on their toes. They're just so eager for your pick. But I think this would be easy. Well, significantly easier if valuations were average to below average. Like if we were having this conversation in 2008, I think I could have found Amazon or an Apple or a Microsoft that was fairly valued and been like, absolutely, I'll ride this for 10 years. I think my struggle here is all those blue and true companies, the valuations are absolutely insane in my eyes right now. So I know that that's a significant headwind that goes against me, but let's see how you solve this problem.
Yeah, well, we won't know for a decade, but or maybe we'll know before then, because this year both of these companies go bankrupt. But the two that I would choose are, one is Pool Corporation. That's the one that I feel most strongly about. They're like the well-performing cockroach of the they will not die. People just when the market goes down, people still love their pools, man. They like cling to their pools. Market goes up, they're inviting their friends over to come get in the pool. They just like, so Pool Corporation. And the second one is much, much, much riskier. But I love this stock. Like it's the one that and this is right, as we always say, not investment advice. No one else needs to go love this stock. I think this business model is sick. But that's why I think regulation is actually a pretty likely, I would say, especially in this current regime. But TransDigm Group is a stock I am all about. So they're like they're the man behind the curtain when it comes to like I say aerospace broadly, but like airplane parts and whatnot. So basically what they do is they sell all of the aftermarket parts to like the Boeings, etc. of the world, and they do it. They have like a lock on the market to a certain extent, and so they charge like ridiculous prices for these parts because they like got it on lockdown, which is why I think the government at some point the government's going to shut that down. But they have their revenue model margins are like ridiculous. So those are my two that I would choose.
I mean, I think you've let the bubble go to your head here. You talked about airplanes and pools, which are both like as pro-cyclical spending categories as I can think.
I'm going to fly my plane right into the water. I'll tell you that much.
I'll tell you, I did give this significant thought. I don't have a pick, and I don't know if that means I'm going to get kicked off the podcast or not. But I went back through some of my screens, and when I rebalanced last year, and I've had a really good year, I'm up like 70, 80% with value stocks, which almost never happens, right? I had basically 10 stocks in the portfolio.
Is that over the last 12 months or year to date?
Trailing 12 months.
Okay, cool. I mean, either one is
it's ridiculous.
It's great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Trailing 12. And so I went back through some of those screens trying to find deals. We went through the Seth Klarman 13F a while back. Like, basically, there's one stock. There's one stock in the entire universe of U.S. stocks that is worth doing a little research, and it's one I already own. It's TDS Corporation.
Yep.
And that is up. This is not a brag session, and none of this is investment advice. That's up, I don't know, something like 30% year to date because I bought it in one of my other accounts. So I don't feel like that's screaming cheap either. Basically, I'm just not finding anything, man. And that's really perplexing. That makes my life hard. I don't know. My next rebalance is coming up, and I'm going to have to think hard about how I handle that because I can't find any deals. It's like you said, I'll probably dig heavily into the international markets. Even the commodities conversations we've had previously, like those have really run. You were front running on that, Doogles, and I like that strategy. But they've run so much, I don't know that I consider any of those commodities cheap. I mean, it's just
I know.
Woe is me over here. I'm gonna cry myself a river. There's nothing to buy.
You and Justin Timberlake, man.
Yeah,
go
seriously.
hang out in the corner. How about this then? How about this? Choose a number between 1 and 4,214.
I'm going to go 3,123.
3, 1, 2, 3. All right. So this has got funds and stocks in them. All right. So you, Skippy, are choosing East West Bank Corp. Inc. Okay. Choose another number.
Give me straight threes. Give me 3,333.
You sticking in the 3,000s, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Straight threes.
I like
W. Granger.
W. Granger. Yeah. Quality companies there.
All right. There you go. Okay, so we got your two. So we'll just random equities. Let's see.
It's
so when you guys listen to episode whatever 2,644. You'll know.
I asked Doogles this week if I could pick a ETF instead of an individual stock for this competition, and you didn't like that, did you?
You can choose one. There's only one ETF you can choose, but I'll let you choose it.
What's that?
ARK Innovation. If you want that one, I'll give you that one all day.
Can I short ARK Innovation for 10 years?
Oh man. Yeah,
that's too much.
Cool. Oh, yeah, we got our stocks, man.
I actually love the approach. Yeah, my two random stocks are definitely going to be your two pro-cyclical. Let's go fly a pool into an airplane.
I'm flying pools into airplanes all day. What's in your fishbowl?
Yeah, couple things. Can we just talk Elon Musk and Bitcoin? I mean, we don't have to spend much time on it, but
it's interesting though what he did this week. So spit.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Elon has been a big fan of cryptocurrencies for a long time. I think his fascination started with Bitcoin. Would you say that's fair, Doogles? lately he's been a Dogecoin guy.
The Doge father.
Anytime I hear, so his tweets literally move markets in this space. Dogecoin more than Bitcoin because it's a less developed and smaller market cap currency.
Yep.
But certain things he can do or say can cause the supply or the price to go up 10%, right? Which is just crazy. It's absolutely crazy, but it is what it is. So he tweets out a thing. I think this is Thursday. Gosh, earlier this year, I think it was, Tesla made news by saying they would accept Bitcoin to buy a car. So basically, you walk in, you don't even have to pay cash. You just transfer your Bitcoin and you buy the car. And then Thursday, he comes out and says, after we reviewed this, we've decided we no longer accept Bitcoin because of the environmental impact. So first, that schizophrenic nature, like, do you really think he learned anything new about Bitcoin's energy consumption in the past few months? Or do you think the board got to him? What do you think is driving this decision?
I mean, there could be a lot in there, but the most generous, I guess, to the organization, not to Elon himself, but to the organization would be that people just kept saying, dude, I understand that you are obsessed with this. However, you know that we make electric vehicles in a claim that we're trying to save the environment, right? And I think it just like that incongruence we can't get over. So I think that's the most generous to the organization.
I think that's maybe the most likely as well. I think that's probably what happened because regardless of his personal beliefs, it doesn't really add up. I mean, Tesla also has a solar panel company and 1,000 other things. It's entirely branded on better for the environment. So it was an odd stance to start, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's where he likes to start. Show me the odd stances, and I shall take them.
Oh, so good.
I'm reading Bill Gates' How to Avoid a Climate Disaster right now. So it fits right in there.
Is that like chapter 3? Like tell Musk to stop taking Bitcoin?
Pretty much. It reads like so far every 7th sentence is some version of, I know this sounds like doom and gloom. However, I don't mean to be doom and gloom. And then the next sentence is, so everything's going to crap. Like that's basically how the book reads. I actually think it's pretty interesting. But I'm like maybe a quarter of the way through. So I still have a lot more to go.
Yeah, I'm sure it's good. Gates is a smart guy. I just have one more thing I wanted to chat about today, and it's more just to get your initial reaction. Because we talk about incentives on the show, right? And how so much of business is based on structuring incentives in the right way. Well, the Ohio governor, Mike DeWine, took $5 million of federal money and created 5 weekly lotteries of $1 million each for vaccinated individuals. I guess the main thing I thought during this, and I've thought this for the last 15 months, is college students of this generation are so lucky because there's so many real-time experiments happening around
that's true.
incentives and everything else that they're going to have the data for soon. And they're going to say, this state did this with masks, or this governor did this with incentives, or this government did this. And I just think it's, I'm super jealous of the college students. I think that's my main reaction. But then I also wanted to get your take, and maybe it's not specifically on this incentive, but maybe if you're in that seat, Doogles, like if you're a governor of a state and you've decided that you want to do everything in your power to increase vaccination rates, what type of ideas are you throwing out to your staff and maybe trying to make happen?
I don't know specific ideas because I haven't thought too much about this, but I do think incentivizing the crap out of getting people to get vaccinated is the way I would go, independent of my like political beliefs. I think going back to something that William Green was saying was, he's like, I don't want to get political. However, can we just say, like, if you do these things, regardless of what I believe, if you do these things, you're more likely to survive. And I would like for my state to survive. And so I think having strong incentives for folks to get vaccinated, because the mask wearing, I think, can become political real quick. And there's a lot around that. But and I know vaccines also has a political bend, but it's like look, I want our economy to have like a strong foothold, and I want my people to survive. And so whatever it takes, the economic dollars, I mean, 5 million sounds like incredibly cheap relative to the amount that you're going to be able to generate in economic dollars if you can reopen and get herd immunity going on, right? And so I throw the kitchen sink out the windy. Defenestration, bro.
Yeah, that was kind of my initial thought. And so to tie together a couple things, what William was saying last week in the interview, again, was I don't see it as political. It tied directly to his book. It was like, I talked to the world's best probabilistic thinkers about how they make decisions. And if someone like Edward Thorp was in this situation, he'd be saying, my greatest chance of success for my economy and a bunch of other things is to do XYZ. I thought when I first saw this headline, I thought Ohio was using $5 million of like their state funds. And I was going, that's going to be a tough sell, but I'll bet you money if you run the numbers that 95% of the time you get more than $5 million in economic impact if you get to the point where it's truly like life is normal. Now, I think that's debatable. And despite the fact that we don't give investment advice on this show, one thing we give even less of is scientific advice on vaccines or health and safety. But this kind of seems like a no-brainer. I think if I was in the office and I chose to do some sort of cash gift, I'd try and make it so the odds are really good. So if your state has, say, 5 million people in it, and I'm giving away $5 million, I might do a bunch of smaller drawings where like your chance of winning $1,000 is pretty high. You know, maybe it's like 1 in 10 people that get vaccinated win $1,000. I don't know if that math works out, but I think you know where I'm going, because sometimes this lottery of, oh, well, I'm never going to win the $1 million works against the grain. Whereas if I knew there's a 1 in 10 chance of me winning $1,000, like, gosh,
you hop on it.
I like those odds.
Yeah. There's another way that, and this, both of us I think are ignoring the ultimate ROI math around it, but just throwing out ideas. Another way I just thought about it is if you have it over a longer time frame, but incentivize the speed at which someone gets vaccinated. So if you get vaccinated in the next 2 weeks, you actually get like 10 tickets in the lotto. If you get it over like in 3 weeks, then you get like 5 tickets. If you get it in 4 weeks, right? And in 3 months, we're going to have like several drawings, and then, but your likelihood increases based on the speed at which you get vaccinated. I don't know how complex this starts to get, but incentivize, I think, is kind of what we're both saying.
I think I'm intrigued by the possibility. And then this actually ties into, the book I'm in the middle of right now is the Michael Lewis new book, The Premonition.
Excited to see what you think.
And what's so crazy, I haven't read it, so I don't want to make any grand conclusions, but as the vaccine rollout was happening, there was this lingering doubt in the back of my head, like they were prioritizing the older crowd, and I totally get why they did it, and I'm not even saying I disagree with it, but I was going, listen, that 80-year-old grandma is not the super spreader. Like it just never really added up to me, and I thought maybe like a random distribution would have a better approach to slowing the spread, or maybe targeting the people that we think are high transmitters. And there is some mention in this Michael Lewis book of a researcher, and I'm going to forget the name, I think the last name is Green, who did some like computer models around this and basically came up with a suggestion that you could, if you would have targeted like your 18 to 32-year-old crowd with the initial vaccination rollout, that would have stopped the spreading so much that you actually could have, according to their model, saved more lives. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing, and it kind of all ties back in here, because I didn't even hear that approach debated, and it seemed weird that there was just like a one-size-fits-all approach across the world for the vaccine rollout, right?
Yeah. These decisions are hard.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe and get in touch with us.
At Skippy Doodles on Twitter and skippydoodles@gmail.com.